So have you ever really stopped to think about how we predict what's going to happen next? We're always told to think one step at a time, kind of like watching dominoes fall, right? But what if there's a totally different, maybe even more powerful way to do it? What if you could actually know the end right from the beginning? That's what we're diving into today. Two completely different ways to see the future.
I mean, it really all boils down to this one massive question. How does the universe actually work? Is it just this endless chain reaction? One thing causing the next and the next? Or is there some kind of grand design, a final destination that everything's moving towards? The really wild part is, they could both be true. It just depends on how you look at it.
Okay, so let's start with what you might call our brain's default setting. We are absolutely wired for cause and effect. It's just how we see the world. You push a domino, it falls. It hits the next one. Simple. A leads to B, which then leads to C. This is how we get through our day. It's how you make your coffee in the morning, how you drive to work. It's all about that next step. Super simple, totally predictable, and let's be honest, incredibly useful.
Right? And we've all got a name for this, don't we? The domino effect. It's just our go-to intuitive way of seeing how things are going to play out. Now, this way of thinking has a fancy name, of course. It's called causal reasoning. Basically, you start with the first cause, that initial push of the first domino, and you just reason your way forward. The question you're always asking is, okay, so what happens next? It's all about looking forward one step at a time.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's not the only way to think? Let's completely flip the script here. Let's try thinking from the end. Okay, now this is where things get a little mind-bending. Seriously, what if, instead of getting bogged down in the very next step, you could understand the entire journey just by knowing the destination? Just picture it, starting with the final goal and working your way backward. How cool would that be?
So this way of thinking is called teleological reasoning. It actually comes from the Greek word telos, which just means end or goal. And see, instead of asking what happens next, it asks a completely different question. It asks, what's the most efficient, the most elegant path to get from the starting line to the finish line? It's all about the big picture, the whole journey, not just that next little step.
All right, so we've got these two super powerful ways of looking at the world, causal and teleological. But how do you even start using them? I mean, where do you begin? Well, it turns out there's this secret ingredient, this one crucial first step that makes the whole thing possible.
Think about it like this. Before you can play any game, you have to know what the pieces on the board are, right? You can't apply either of these reasoning methods to just raw chaos. You have to organize the world first. You have to break it down into distinct objects and concepts. So, for example, if you're playing pool, are the important objects the actual physical balls, or are they things like forces and angles and spin? See? How you define your pieces at the very beginning, that changes everything.
And this whole process of ordering the world, it has a name. It's called analogy reasoning, and it's basically how we make sense of all the crazy complexity out there. We look at something and we say, that behaves kind of like a wave. Or, this whole system works sort of like a machine. We're using analogies to build a simpler model, something our brains can actually wrap around and analyze.
So here's the crucial bit. It's really a simple three-step process. Step 1, you just observe a system. Take it all in. Step 2, you order it. You use that analogy reasoning we just talked about to define your objects and concepts, your game pieces. And only then, for step 3, do you get to choose your weapon. Are you going to go with the step-by-step causal method or the big-picture teleological one?
Okay, I know this all sounds a little abstract, so let's make it super concrete. We're going to look at a real-world example of how you can have two totally different views of the exact same system.
And to see this in action, we're going to dive into the world of classical mechanics. Yeah, a little bit of physics. This is the science that describes how pretty much everything moves, from a baseball you throw to a planet orbiting the sun.
So imagine a physicist looking at, say, a planet orbiting the sun. The first thing they have to do is order it. They use that analogy reasoning to break the whole scene down into these conceptual objects. Things like the moving bodies themselves, obviously, but also the forces acting on them, their locations, their speeds, their accelerations, and all the energies involved. These become the puzzle pieces they get to play with.
And this is where it all clicks into place. Physicists actually have a choice. They can go the causal route, the Isaac Newton way. This method focuses on forces and acceleration to calculate, step by step, where that planet is going to be in the very next instant. Or they can go teleological, using this incredible idea called a Lagrangian. And this tool, it's amazing. It doesn't care about forces at all. It only cares about energy. It just assumes the planet will always take the most efficient path possible, what they call the path of least action, to get from point A to point B. Now, here's the really mind-blowing part. Both methods, one looking just at the next tiny step and one looking at the entire journey, give you the exact same answer. How amazing is that? Two totally different philosophies describing one single reality.
But look, this isn't just some abstract physics lesson, right? This whole idea of dual perspective thinking has massive implications for our everyday lives. So, why should you care? Why does your point of view actually matter?
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, first off, just remember that there's almost always more than one valid way to look at a problem, so don't get stuck in a single perspective. Second, how you frame a problem right at the start, which pieces you decide to focus on, that's going to determine the kinds of answers you can even get, so you've got to choose that frame wisely. Third, you can totally mix and match these ways of thinking. Start with the end goal in mind, that teleological view, and then use causal, step-by-step thinking to build the path to get there. And finally, and this is the most important part, this isn't just for physicists. This is a seriously powerful tool for planning your career, for building a company, or heck, even for just figuring out your to-do list for tomorrow.
So, I'm going to leave you with a question to chew on. Think about a problem that's on your mind right now. Any problem, big or small. Chances are you're focused on the next step, right? That causal chain. But just for a minute, I want you to take a moment and flip it. Just ask yourself, what is the actual end goal here, and what is the most direct, most elegant path to get there? I bet you'll be surprised by the answers you find when you start thinking from the end.